Uh, Thank you for tuning in today, and we're happy to have a few of our partners join us and talk about photography. It's something that I know a lot of our clients really enjoy. It's something that I love to do, and as well as I know your clients. So today we have a select few from the Kusini collection partners that will talk about how we do photography while on destination. So we have our special guests from Namibia, Birgit and Jason. Come say hi to them. We've also got Amit coming all the way from India for Encounters Asia. We have Alex Arias from Costa Rica Sun Tours. You can see him. We have Tyrone from Classic Zambia. He's actually got Starlink and he's in the Kafue National Park right now. We've also got Q1 Rush from Imvelo Safari Lodges and representing Classic Africa Safaris from Uganda. We've got Tad filling in for them. All right, so the way this will work, the first half of the webinar, we're going to do a little bit more of a gallery style. We'll show a nice photo, and then our partners will talk a little bit about how they captured that photo and how we can put your clients in these positions where they can get that amazing shot, no matter what their skill level is, okay? And then on the second half of the presentation, we're going to do a little bit of a round table session where we're going to ask some questions to our team on the ground and talk about, logistics, guide experience. We'll talk about the vehicle configuration while on safari. So we'll talk about those questions. And hopefully what we can get out of here is that, we can position yourselves as someone that is familiar with photography, because we know that that's getting very popular these days, and it's good to have a little bit of a knowledge when it comes to photography. Okay, so let's get it started. So batting leadoff, we'll start off in Zambia with Tyrone. Hey Ty, this is a great shot from the Busanga Plains in the Kafue National Park. Can you tell us a little bit how you got this shot and maybe what time of the year you can get something cool like this where you got the rain in the background and an open sky?
Yeah, hi everyone. This photo was actually taken 2 weeks ago, so it was fresh on the mind. But when you asked Mark to put some images together, that might stand out, to inspire guests, to come through. Obviously, Zambia is often not on the forefront of people's safari brains, but if it is, it's typically the South Ruangwa as a park, and it's typically then to come in the middle of the dry season. And so there I was on one part of a park called the Kafue, in the rainy season, seeing this most spectacular scene, and it just kind of reminded me that often the less obvious places and less obvious times of years throw up the sort of the most unique scenes. And so yeah, it was just more of a reminder that there's a lot more out there than what the masses might think you have to do to achieve good photography. And yeah, by shooting a little bit wider here, the plains of Busanga, rather than the sort of more portrait style, I felt kind of showed the place. And yeah, the fact that the rains have started for me is actually a fantastic time of year to go on safari and a fantastic time of year to take photographs. The light that this time of year gives you is so much nicer and so much more natural. The dust is gone. And so yeah, that's sort of what inspired me to take the photo a couple of weeks back and put it on this presentation.
And Ty, just real quickly, what time of day was this taken?
It was an afternoon, probably about 5 in the afternoon. This time of year, this is when the storms start building up, sort of late afternoon. And you can see some rain is falling. That's that wispy effect, but very lightly, just to the left of the setting sun. So yeah, about 5 in the afternoon. Yeah, that's where it was.
Yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, if we
Yeah,
didn't have the caption there, some people might even think this was in the Serengeti, right?
exactly. Yeah, that's right. And it's nice to know that you can still get such attractive scenes that are akin to places that people are more familiar with. And of course, in places that are as quiet as Zambia, as quiet as the Kafue, and as quiet as the Busanga Plains in terms of tourists, the ability to sort of maximize your photographic opportunity without jostling with vehicles and is really, maximal here. This place is 600 square kilometers. I was one of only 2 vehicles out in that whole area. So again, from a photographer's perspective, that freedom of movement cannot be underestimated as well.
Wow, amazing. Thank you, Ty.
No
Now
worries.
moving on to Costa Rica with some we slow down the shutter speed a little bit here. Alex, can you tell us a little bit about this waterfall photo? Because I think there's a lot of things that we can talk about here. Earlier we were chatting about the difficulty of actually taking the shot. Yes, from a technical perspective, you can talk about slowing down the shutter speed, but talk about how hard it is to get a shot like this with how dark the area is with the canopy.
Hi, Mark. Hi, everybody. I love this picture. As my friend Chino, which is the guy in the picture, says, this is his best picture, maybe because we cannot see his face. But this is La Cangreja waterfall. It's in the national park called Rincón de la Vieja, which is one of the more active volcanoes in Costa Rica.
Sorry,
Oops,
man.
that's not my picture. That's the one, yeah. So this particular photo has a series of technical complications. First of all, low light conditions. This waterfall is in a canyon, maybe about 200 feet deep canyon. You have one axis and one exit, that's it. Again, complication to the low light conditions, you have to lower your shutter speed. As you can see, 2.5 seconds. To get this photo, this shot, you need a tripod, or you have to place your camera in a very steady place. Not to mention that in this case, you have to hike about 2 hours to get to this particular waterfall. I was using a Canon 5D, a lens that is wide angle lens, 17 millimeters. Again, I told my friend, you have to be there, don't move for 30 seconds. Of course, it took me only 2.5 seconds, but it's just fun to see some people not moving with your hands like that for 30 seconds. Just being a guide,
And
Another
Alex,
thing is, yes.
sorry, quickly, how difficult is it to hike over to the East Fall, especially if you're lugging camera gear?
Well, as I told you, it's about 2 hours hike. But again, just to get there, you will get all kinds of different shows of wildlife. Just hiking there, you can see lots of monkeys, lots of scenery. It's amazing. Of course, you have to carry your gear. These days, there are all kinds of cameras, and it's getting easier for people to carry a smaller camera to get a shot like this. So our idea is to help people, no matter what kind of camera or equipment they have, we would love to help people to get a shot like this.
No, awesome. Thank you, Alex. That's super helpful.
And
then, sorry,
what to say? Yeah,
go ahead.
can you go back for a second? Yes.
Whoops,
Whoops, the other way. Yeah, you would think it's a solution of the color of the water. I love the color, the contrast between the turquoise of the water and the greeny of the trees. What happened here is the water, there's a lot of copper sediments in the water from the volcano, and that reflects the light, like this turquoise color. Of course, the lens captures more light or more blue than your eye, but again, it's very easy to get this effect in the shot.
Awesome. Thanks for adding that, Alex. Really forgot about that. Thank you. And then moving on to Namibia, Jason, if you're there, can you tell us a little bit about this shot? Because I think for a lot of photographers that are, obviously a lot of people that go to Africa will do wildlife photography, but landscape photography in Namibia is amazing, and especially when you're out here photographing shipwreck. Can you tell us a little bit more about this shot?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Mark. So obviously this is sort of that iconic sort of thing you see along the Skeleton Coast, that's, the shipwrecks and the Skeleton Coast. And it just adds a different element to, traveling around the sort of Namibia, and just adding that extra element of just beyond wildlife. And there's the skeleton coast is sort of spread with hundreds of shipwrecks, but they're not all accessible. And you look at this one and you think, oh, it looks so deep and transcendent that you sort of almost get transported there. But a lot of the time you end up at a shot like this at midday. So one of the tricks you sort of have to face is you got to shoot it slightly differently instead of trying going for that golden light. And that's why I went with the black and white in this. And another sort of one of the tricks that you have to sort of hope for, and it's almost like wildlife photography, is this coastline is still very, very rough, and the seas are changing, the beach is changing, everything is changing. So this is actually the first time that I saw these ribs exposed by some rough seas. Went back a couple of months later, and then the whole sort of structure of the ship had changed, and now you photograph in another thing. So when you get there, you just have to find the frame, get your sort of subject into it, and make it happen.
Wow, yeah, that's awesome. It's interesting that this is taken during midday, because generally photographers will avoid shooting in harsher light conditions, right?
Yeah, it just adds a bit of a challenge, but if you sort of get into it and you know what you're shooting for, and how you sort of have the picture in your mind as to what you want it to look like, you then sort of just play with the light and use the harshness to your advantage to sort of get that contrast of black and white in an image, which you see here, where you've got that light background and that sort of dark sort of feature in the front of the shipwreck.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks for that, Jason. Really awesome shot. Cool. So moving on, not too far from Namibia, is we're gonna go to Zimbabwe in Hwange National Park. Kewan, maybe I'll let you do a little bit more of the talking and tell us more about this photo and who the photographer is, because it's such a great story.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So this photograph was taken of our cobras, which are the community wildlife protection units up at our Ngama sanctuary, just on the boundary fence of Hwange National Park in Zimbabwe. These guys were in preparation for the rhinos 2 years ago in May 2022. They were preparing to guard the rhinos and were performing drills. And this is a shot that's called substitute rhino. And they used donkeys in this case. So the cobras had to do a whole lot of different drills and get set up and completely sorted for the rhino arrival in May 2022. The photographer is Aaron Gakowski. He's an internationally acclaimed environmental photojournalist and film producer. He's won several awards, including Wildlife Photographer of the Year, Nature Photographer of the Year, and he recently won the 2024 Environmental Photographer of the Year. So he's been doing photojournalism and filmmaking for more than 15 years now, and he travels all around the world documenting and specializing in human wildlife conflict situations. So from shark, definning in Mozambique to all kinds of voodoo scenarios in Benin and in Central Africa. He's been around the world and doing this, and he does it extremely well. So this photograph, is true to him. It's quite different from your typical wildlife photographer shot, but for him it represents a lot. His mantra when it comes to taking sort of award-winning photographs is there are 4 aspects to an incredible photograph. One being the subject, the second one is the behavior, third is the actual setting that the subjects are in, and then the final one is lighting. So for him on this shot, the lighting of the light box in front of the cobras here and the donkeys, and then the backlit scenario with the floodlights, and then the beautiful radiant blue sky were top notch for him. That made this photograph one of his best of all time. Also, it's more about the backstory for him in this photograph, with the great community initiative bringing rhino back to Hwange after 20 years of them being extinct, setting up sanctuaries on communal land, and bringing 2 rhino back. We actually recently brought back in September to a different sanctuary down on the boundary of the national park. So there's that whole backstory, which also makes the photograph very special.
Yeah, thanks for that, Q. And yeah, this is definitely a very powerful photo, and I really love the way he staged, this and called it substitute rhino. Absolutely
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah.
If you guys tuning in, if you haven't followed Aaron Mikowski on Instagram, please go ahead and follow his stuff. It's really amazing photo journalism. Cool. And then moving on to India, Amit. We've shown this photo a few times when we're on sales trip, but I love this photo and the story behind it. And maybe I'll let you do the talking on what's going on in this photograph.
Hey, thanks, Max. Hi, everybody. This photo was taken at the Kumbh Mela, which was, the next big Kumbh is that it happens only once every 12 years, and the next one that's happening is in January this year. So it's a mega event. We'll see about, if I don't know, somewhere between 90 to 100 million people come to take a dip in the Ganges in 2 months. So talk about people, we got them more than anything. But this particular picture, I remember clearly. I was sitting with a couple of clients on my left, and two of these sadhus, these spiritual men on the right, who were part of the prayer in the evening, of the meditation. This started speaking English to us. And they were like, yeah, we used to be lawyers. We quit everything. We live under a tree now. It's been 8 years. So just sort of understanding that whole religious aspect of how they've given up everything. Like, they used to be lawyers, very well accomplished people, and sort of given all that up. And then for the last 8, 9 years have been living under a tree, which pretty much means in like a very tiny village in the forest somewhere. And they pretty much live on donations, which the villagers bring to them, is fascinating, and then to understand their life on how they've given up earthly possessions and now lead a very simplistic life. And there's thousands of these kind of people we'll meet, and we end up meeting them. So we have trips that are happening in January, February. We have like 8 or 9 small groups, many FITs happening just around this festival, and there'll be hundreds and thousands of these tents, where a particular spiritual leader or a sadhu or somebody who's trying to attain moksha, is going to be there. And these sort of fire prayers happen every evening for almost 2 months around this. So it's, I call it India's Burning Man in many ways. It's like, yeah, stopping back in time and how it used to be, and how a lot of the things there are also, you'll have many quirky moments. You suddenly have a sadhu on an elephant walk by, right next to you. Will suddenly have somebody who's completely tattooed, and telling their story, and their part. And these sadhus come from all across India, descending down into this one place where the 3 rivers meet in a place called Prayagraj, which is 2 hours from this holy city of Varanasi. And the entire city is created. Millions of people come to visit and go on the bathing days. Unlike if you avoid the bathing days, the other days are very calm, and you can actually sit down like this and spend time. And this photograph was taken, in the evening. There's of course challenges with light, because it's quite dark in there, but it's well lit by other stuff, like by smaller lights, by fire, by all this other thing. So I think, if I remember correctly, this image was as long as 11 or 12 years ago. I had a tripod that I had to sort of make sure, because of dim light, I was playing around with higher ISO shutter speeds in order to get this image. But I believe even today, when I go this time, I'm going to try just with my new iPhone. I think they can do pretty wondrous things as
Yeah,
well.
exactly. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
iPhone can take photos like this. But yeah, I think what's great about this image is the human connection that you can make, right, when you're traveling, especially during the Kumela, like real interactions with sadhus that you're never gonna find anywhere else. Awesome. Thanks for that, Amit. Super cool. Then moving over to Tad. Tad, this is a great photo taken by Lindsay while on a gorilla trek. And we've done a lot of landscape shots, but we'll kind of move on now to portrait photography, and specifically this one, and a really nice portrait of a gorilla. Can you tell us a little bit more about this shot, Tad?
Yeah, jumping in for Lindsay here, but done a number of gorilla treks. And yeah, it's funny that the first and maybe only portrait shot we have in this webinar is of a primate, of a gorilla, not of a human. But the thing about gorilla photography is that like Alex said, in getting that waterfall shot, it does require quite a bit of effort to get to where the gorillas are. Of course, it depends on the gorilla family and how far you have to go. It depends on the country. If you're in Uganda or Rwanda, we'll kind of set aside the DRC for this conversation. But so the biggest challenge is just getting there. But typically, once you get to where the gorilla family is, and that trek can take anywhere from 30 minutes, if you're lucky, to several hours. By the time you get to the gorilla family, they're generally settled in for what, whether it's napping, eating, hanging out, playing. So there's not a lot of movement, and you can get pretty close to them. And so having a big zoom lens isn't really necessary. I mean, there's a little bit of a zoom here, 200 millimeter zoom, but you really don't need a massive lens to be able to get these kind of portraits. And you don't have to move around a lot. You can pretty reasonably say you're going to be sedentary with the gorillas as they're in their family. The bigger issue especially in Bwindi National Park in Uganda is the lighting. This one looks like there's a fairly good amount of light, but oftentimes when I've trekked with gorillas, because it is a very dense rainforest, you're dealing more with trying to manage the lack of light. And the other issue is the weather. It is a rainforest, so you do need to prepare for rain and for weather 12 months out of the year. Even if it's the dry season in a rainforest, it can always rain. So you have those two conditions to be aware of, is the lighting and the weather. I think comparing Uganda versus Rwanda, what I've found in Rwanda is oftentimes, especially for the lighting issue, it's less of an issue because there is a bamboo forest that abuts the thicker rainforest higher up on the Virunga volcanoes. And that bamboo can be very easily macheted out of the way for photographers. It tends to be less thick. And so you get a little bit more light there. And it makes for a little bit easier photography in terms of managing the lighting situation.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Tad. Yeah, Tad's going to get really into photography now that we're working together.
I'm an expert on a photography webinar.
Yeah, exactly. And moving back to Costa Rica, this is cool. We talked about earlier with Alex that oftentimes you associate Costa Rica with its amazing bird life and the star species, usually the sloth. But we wanted to showcase the photo of a puma because it's something that's not often talked about. So Alex, can you tell us the story about this puma?
Well, first of all, that you cannot get close to these guys like you get close to the gorillas. So for obvious reason. So as you can imagine, it's not easy to see or to spot a puma in Costa Rica, even though it's more difficult to get a photo. First of all, because when you're hiking with a group and what happens that you run across a puma, people will be shaking. They're scared, they're so the emotion, and most of the time they miss the shot. And then you have to, you're looking at the birds, and then I tell people, there's a puma there, and you're setting the camera ready to shoot the bird, so you have to change the settings. Most of the time, people miss the shot. This shot is from the Osa Peninsula in a national park called Corcovado, which is one of the more biodiverse, intense places on the planet. We're lucky, especially after COVID, we get maybe 2 or 3 reports per week for that specific area in Corcovado, especially from December to April, which is our dry season. Again, that doesn't mean it's going to rain, but it's supposed to be our dry season. Yeah, we've been lucky. I was very lucky the last season. Maybe I went there 15 times with 15 different groups, and we probably saw puma 8 or 10 times during that season. And it's important, when we see a puma, my recommendation to people is put your camera away and enjoy the moment. And when you see the animal, the majesty of this, they're so beautiful. When you take that picture with your brain, then get your camera and get the picture.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great advice, Alex. And the one thing we talked about earlier today, this one was shot at relatively slow shutter speed, where you're using a tripod on this shot.
Yeah, we always carry, as guides, in my case, I don't really have time to get pictures because I'm carrying a tripod with spotting scope. And sometimes I'm dying to get a picture, but my clients go first.
Right.
And this, I love this picture because some of the people that were working with me that day, they were repeat travelers with me. They've been with me maybe 5 or 6 times in Costa Rica. And that specific day, they were asking me, Alex, you have shown me all these beautiful birds and animals. When are you going to show us a cat? And boom, we found the cat.
Wow.
And
That's-
again, I set up the scope and I put my camera on top of the scope just to get more study because it was dark. This is the rainforest. And as you can see, it was not close. So we're using a 100 to 400 millimeters lens, f8, and 180 of the second, just to trying to get a little more details and better light on the photo.
Awesome. Great shot, Alex. Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And then moving on, some more wildlife photography. This one is actually taken in Hwange National Park. Kyuan, tell us a little bit more about this shot of a mummy and cub.
Yeah, so this was taken on the Ngama Plains in the southeast of Hwange. It was taken by one of our guests, Chris Labe. She started coming out to Hwange way back in 2015 and has always been guided by Vusa, who's our now head guide. And as you can see, well, lions are obviously very prominent in Hwange and on the plains themselves. And it is her favorite subject to photograph, but especially lion cubs. So she was out again in July this year and out on the drive with Vusa and said to him, listen, if you can get me a lion picking up a lion cub in the mouth, I'm going to be out of my mind happy if you can do that for me. So they went out early. July is very cold, obviously out in the bush on game drive. They took an hour or so to find a female lioness. There was a couple lionesses out on the edge of the plain wandering about. They disappeared behind the brush and they thought they had lost their chance. But a few minutes later, they reappeared and we're looking at another couple lionesses that were hunting or starting to stalk some wildebeest. And suddenly, to the left of them, they heard little mewing of the cubs from the bush, and a cub appeared from the bush and started walking towards their vehicle. So once the cub was out, the female, that obviously their mother, saw the cub and started walking towards the cub from behind the vehicle. And Vusa said to Chris, "You better get ready. This is the shot I told you about." And literally a few seconds later, the lioness came across and just picked the cub up and started to walk with it in its mouth. I've lived in Africa all my life and been doing safaris for around about 40 years now. And I've never seen anything like that.
Wow.
I think you just be really, really lucky to encounter this scenario. So
Yeah,
she framed the photograph, has it up in her house in Maine, back in the States, and smiles every time she walks past it. So yeah, truly a very special moment for her.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to be in the right place at the right time with the
Yes.
right guide.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's the dream guide scenario where the lions or the other animals, whoever they are, you say something and a couple minutes later they just do it. So dream guide scenario.
Awesome. Yeah, great shot by Chris. Thank you, Kyuan.
Pleasure.
And talking about a little bit we talked about conservation a little bit earlier. This is actually a really great shot of rhino tracking in the Damaraland, and maybe I'll let Jason do more of the talking here and the story behind this rhino. Jason.
Yeah, so if you were to ask me how I ended up in this situation with this rhino in sort of full frame looking through my lens, we'd gone out in Damaraland looking for the desert adapted black rhino. We're out with the rhino rangers and expecting to go out on foot, but things just didn't pan out that day, and we sort of got a bit disheartened, and we were on our way back to camp, and then we were sort of driving the track that we'd already driven, and sort of as we were coming over this hill, this big male whose name is Teka sort of had this full of testosterone, but he's busy mating with a female. he said, well, now you're in my territory, you know. So he then started sort of charging or mock charging the car, you know, and he just sort of, the frame started getting fuller and fuller. So it wasn't the most ideal golden sighting where we didn't want to disturb them, but he did approach us. But it just gave us a sort of perfect setting on top of a Dummerland hilltop. And yeah, again, you talk about luck and positioning, and it all just played out that day.
And Jason, how far was this rhino at 435 millimeters? That's like not too far, eh? But
so probably he got a bit closer than I'd like to admit. But he probably ended up at about 80 meters away from my vehicle before I sort of honked and had to, you know, start the car and get him to turn around. But at this stage, he was about at I'd say at 100 meters, but coming at a hot pace towards us, just to let us know who had bought in that area.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a very imposing shot of that rhino.
Yeah, you know, so obviously when we're in Dummerland and we, you know, going out with the rangers, you sort of want to go in and have a non-disturbed sighting of these rhinos, where you go in, you sort of carry your equipment and you take your photograph and you leave without disturbing them. And the rangers are there and they sort of, you know, controlling the environment and just making sure that the rhino isn't disturbed, and that's sort of part of the monitoring of them. But the rhino rangers that day covered about 40 kilometers looking for this guy, and we just happened to stumble across him.
Wow, so that's a long way to track them. Wow, 40 kilometers.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Just to jump in and ask one more question of you, Jason, when you're staying at Camp Doris, which is in the heart of the Black Rhino area in the Joint Conservancy area there in Damaraland, typically you recommend, obviously people have to stay 3 nights, but how many nights do you really recommend folks stay if they're photographers in particular and want to get a great photo of a black rhino? And how likely is it? I mean, as you say, this is unlikely and not the ideal scenario, but
yeah,
what's the ideal amount of time, and how likely is it to get a decent shot?
So look, our sort of rhino tracking success rates at Camp Doris, you know, on a 2-night stay, there's about a 90% chance of finding the rhino and viewing them. But you know, it's a different question when you're trying to get an ideal photograph of it in the perfect landscape, in the perfect setting. So I would personally, you know, at a minimum be there 3 nights and sort of just spend the time out there, and you know, you can do your rhino tracking, but then if you are exploring the area and you're sort of doing a game drive and you come across another rhino like we did here, it just increases your chances. But you know, I would spend a week if I could in that area. You know, it's one of those areas, and seeing these majestic animals, you know, out in their sort of true habitat is just amazing, and it sort of makes your heart skip a beat when you do see them.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah.
Really.
And sorry, Mark, I just wanted to chip in here on the sort of technical side.
Yeah.
I think you sort of questioned me at some point where I shot it at f20.
Yeah.
And that was just it was one of those situations where while we were waiting for the rhino rangers, we were shooting, you know, little flowers and playing around with settings and stuff. And then this guy sort of came around, and you take your camera, you put it up, and you just have to shoot in those situations. and you know, sometimes guests have to realize that you just get the photograph and don't worry about the settings too much. But if you have the time, you obviously then fiddle around with the settings.
I believe they call that spray and pray.
now.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Jason. Super cool. Then we got a few more slides here of photographs, but we'll talk about tigers and how we can get shots like these. And I think the story behind these shots is not so much how amazing we can get it, but the logistics behind getting shots like this. Ahmed, tell us more about it.
Yeah, this particular image is actually taken in Kanha National Park in central India. Pretty much the forest that's inspired the Jungle Book at the end of the day, between Kanha and Pench, that whole corridor. And you know, people ask me, am I going to see a tiger on my trip to India? And generally, you know, every second day, if not every day, you are seeing tigers in the wild. They're all over the forest. They're pretty high density. These are the highest density of tigers anywhere in the world is in central India. And within central India, Madhya Pradesh, the state has about 5 national parks which have amazing population of tigers, leopards, wild dogs, even wild elephants now in Bandhavgarh that have come. So the diversity of what you see in these parks alone is quite fascinating. Unlike Africa, we are actually looking for our tigers by the old school way of, alarm calls, park marks. There is no radios, there is no none of that kind of stuff. So it's still old school communication. What did you see? Did the other car see anything? Sort of getting reports from everywhere and tracking down tigers. But there is a good abundance of them in these, particular, let's say, 10 national parks of India have a very healthy population of tigers, where, we get quite lucky almost every day. I was there just 4 days ago, and a tiger walked about 800 meters down the road, actually behind our vehicle. So we kept, back, going forward, and it was just walking behind us the entire time. So you get these opportunities. This particular shot was actually clicked about over 10 years ago. And I chose this one because we were on elephant back when we were taking these shots. So elephant back safaris used to be very common about 10 odd years ago and before. And now what they do is all our parks in central India especially are patrolled by mahouts who are on elephant back, because you cannot get into deep forests in India when you're patrolling for conservation purposes, for against poachers, against what activities happening in what parts of the park. Our national parks are quite big. Like this, Tana alone is about 2,000 square kilometers. So it's a massive park. And we as tourists can only go to about 250 square kilometers of that, or close to 300 actually now. But within that area, there's a massive area to patrol, and with about 450 odd guards in this park, it's still not enough when we are patrolling our national park. So this is when elephants are deployed in the morning, and these elephants have now 25, 30, 40 years ago they came into these forests. They're not adding any more elephants. Only the elephants that are born in captivity are the ones that work in the forests today, and they're hardly used for tourism purposes anymore. The only way you can get on elephants today is actually to go with the conservation team in the morning, to go with the mahouts who are patrolling in the morning. And this is what happened when we went. When they are patrolling in the morning, you can hop on. You get something called a full day exclusive permit, which gets you close to an experience where the park can be yours for 5 to 6 hours of the day. With these permits, unlike Africa and India, there are zones and areas that you can go to. So they segregate people to go to different areas of the park. So there is no overcrowding over one sighting. And once you go to your particular zone, you're there from sunrise till about 10, 11 in the morning. Then you come out of the park and go back in around 2:33 in the afternoon and out of the park at sunset. With a full day exclusive permit, what happens is you can go to any zone you want, anywhere in the park you like, which is allowed for tourism, and be in the park in the afternoon as well when everybody has to leave. So getting that sort of exclusivity at times, sometimes for photographers, a lot of our photography trips at least pick 1 or 2 of those permits during their trip. So, if they luck out at a sighting at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning when everybody else has to leave, you're the only one with the tiger or the leopard or whatever sighting that you are on. So those kind of things really help. And the sightings are, yes, you get quite close to them. I mean, people ask us, how close do you get? I mean, this tiger just 3 days ago literally snicked our car, when it walked by. So it's very similar to what you see in Africa. In a way, they are habituated, because of tourists going in and out all the time into these national parks. So that's you can get quite close. But we are still old school way, tracking our tigers with alarm calls and pug marks and understanding the forest.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think the key here, to reemphasize again, for photography groups, make sure if they're staying there for 4 or 5 nights, couple of those days, get a full day permit. It's the main difference. It's gonna really make your experience a lot better. Cool, awesome. Thank you, Amit. Like, moving on now to going back to the Kafue National Park. I love this shot. Someone I showed this photo to someone, and someone thought that it was a jaguar in Pantanal, but it isn't actually. Ty, tell us a bit more about this photo.
Yeah, that was my line there, Mark. Thanks.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. So I've got nothing more to say. But no, yeah. the Kafue National Park, I realize now that I've got two images from the Kafue. Obviously, the one earlier from one part of the Kafue, the Busanga Plains, but the majority of the Kafue in central and northern Kafue is actually the main river itself. And if no one has ever been there before, it's hard to visualize it. But it is one of Africa's great rivers. And why I'm saying that is because, of course, you can go on safari by vehicle. Your more typical vehicle-based safaris. We enjoy to walk in Zambia, walking safaris. But the ability to take a boat safari is not all that common, and it is certainly common in the Kafue. And as the season heats up, the bush gets warmer, and the interior sort of pools of water in the bush start to dry up. It brings a lot of the prey, and also, as you can see here, the predators down to the riverbank. And because the Kafue is navigable all year, the shade and the cooler environment that these lovely ebony tree-lined rivers give is the perfect hiding place and resting place for our predators. As you can see here, this lovely leopard was one afternoon, and typically it's the afternoon when we go on the river when the light's a little bit lower. Yeah, we found her, and it's not something we see once a year. We've got several resident leopards on the stretch of river that we navigate. Amit said that one of the parks in India that he was talking to is 2,000 square kilometers. The Kafue is 22,000 square kilometers. So we also have the place to ourselves. And again, for me as a photographer and guide photographic interested people, having that feeling of complete freedom and land ability to enjoy a sighting to yourself is exactly what the Kafue is about. And I think a lot of people who may or may not have heard about the Kafue may think that because it is less known, it's less to see. They might appreciate that the wilderness is there, but what do you actually see? And the fact that you can get on a boat, and I would also say probably every other day, find a leopard or a lion from the river is very interesting. And from a photographer's perspective, the ability to shoot at eye level with your subject and not from sort of 95% of photos you see from safari, that slightly downward facing angle from a vehicle. And even if you can try and get a bit lower, here, as you can see, you're basically shooting up, and having the water in the foreground with a bit of texture behind is a very uncommon photo of a relatively common safari animal. So yeah, the Kafue River, and this is in the Musakesi area, central Kafue, is a great place to see big cats in the late afternoons, just like you might see jaguar in the Pantanal.
Good one, Ty. Yeah, thank you. This is such a well-framed photo. I really love it. It's amazing. Thanks, Ty. Okay, and then our last photo, and this is one of the most sought after birds in East Africa that Phil took when he was in Uganda. Tad, tell us more about the shoebill.
Yeah, this is one of Phil Ward's photos. Phil's one of the founders of Classic Africa Safaris. And I think you can really see the connection between the evolution between dinosaurs and birds with this photo of the shoebill. As you say, a sought after photo for birders, but also for photographers. In Uganda, one of the best places in the world, if not the best place in the world, or in Africa where they are, to see them. This was taken in the Mabamba wetlands, which is just on the doorstep of Entebbe, which is where the international airport in Uganda is, right next door to the capital, Kampala. So kind of an urban swamp, papyrus swamp, very accessible, easily from 30 minutes from town on a boat. And it's about a 95% success rate, Phil is saying, in the Mabamba wetlands. So for those birders and those photographers who have to get a picture of a shoebill, that's probably the best place in Uganda to do it. Personally, I've actually taken a photo, not as good as Phil's, but I do have a photo of a shoebill from Murchison Falls, which is the other place that's well known in Uganda to see them. Also on a Nile Delta cruise, heading down the Nile into the Delta area, and again, papyrus swampy landscapes. And what's nice about the shoebills, obviously they're a large bird, so they are a bird that stays relatively still. So you can get these kind of staring contest photos like Phil has here. You're not having to chase after them. Occasionally you're going to see them in flight, but more often than not, you can get shoebills on the ground. And and you can get relatively close to them and get these kind of shots. You can see this is not a massive zoom, 209 mils. So you don't really need to have a massive lens, and you don't have to be an amazing photographer. Myself would fall into that to get good photos, because you're not trying to catch them in flight, as you can oftentimes get them on the ground. So yeah, Uganda would be the place to get this prehistoric looking bird, and those two places most easily in Mabamba, or head up to Murchison Falls.
Awesome. Thanks, Dad. Yeah, so that kind of concludes the first part of our presentation. And I just want to move a little bit about a little bit on a roundtable discussion to chat about some things that your guests might ask, especially when it comes to photography. So I want to start with a question on logistics for our Kusini partners there on the ground. Can you tell us, about logistics? And I'm talking specifically for photography groups that lug a lot of camera gear. How do you deal with that when it comes to taking small bush flights, especially those in Africa and even in Costa Rica, where they have those bush flights as well? How do you deal with that? Anyone, any takers?
For us in Costa Rica, it's a little bit easier because, we have a support vehicle all the time. And when we have to go to the south, we may fly, but sometimes a support vehicle drives down and meet us there with the essential luggage. Because again, here, it's a big limitation, 40 pounds, and checked luggage in the local flights, and 10-pound carry-on. So that gives us nothing. Just my camera gear, way more than that.
Right. Yeah.
And because we're not doing like safari, so we can just get out of the car and get the picture that we're looking for.
Right.
And the other thing is, you carry what you can bring. You bring what you can carry in the hikes.
Right.
So sometimes, you see people with 2 cameras and 5 lenses. Most of the time, I tell people, okay, it's not gonna happen. I recommend you to bring just 1 lens and 1 camera.
That's a good point, especially with the hikes. Sorry, Birgit, go ahead.
No, I mean, obviously in Namibia, we encourage the road trip just because our guides accompany guests, and, you're much more control rather than depending on lodge activities. So we just drive guests around. It's the best way to get to some of the sites, early access, pre-sunrise setups. We include scenic flights, and then our guide would drive up and meet with them afterwards, especially along the Skeleton Coast. But for Namibia, if you really want the ultimate photography-specific tour, a road trip with a private guide just opens up that ability to carry a lot. Like Jason's shipwreck picture is, again, it's discovered by road. So often when you travel is what you see next to the road. A lot of sites you go there. Open game views in movies can be very uncomfortable for photographers. They all want to do open game view until the first dust cloud comes. It's a dusty country. And then everybody's frantically trying to protect their precious lenses. So our cars are closed vehicles with aircon, pop-top roof. You get out where you need to get out, and you stay in the car where you can. And it works really well in our context. And we just include flights for scenic routes, not to get from A to B.
That's a good point, Birgit. How about Tyrone and Q1? How do you guys generally deal with that, with logistics?
Yeah, so getting to Wangi from Victoria Falls, which is the gateway, the road conditions are not very good. Takes about 2.5 hours to get to Det, where you can join our Elephant Express. So if they don't mind that, a little bit of punishment in the first couple of hours of their trip, that's fine. Otherwise, we would do a charter flight in general, especially if it's a dedicated photography group. Do a charter flight with one of our companies called Grand Air. And they're pretty affordable rates relative to certain other companies. So yeah, charters definitely work well, and it gets you in quick to the lodges and between the lodges as well. So that is our current solution for it.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. I'll move on to the next topic, vehicles. Can you guys tell us a little bit about what do you include in the vehicles, especially for photography groups? You know, bean bags, tripods, gimbals. I'm just trying to basically gauge, you know, what photographers need to bring while they go out with you guys.
I can say for Classic Zambia, our camps in the Lower Zambezi and the Kafue, as I say, it's not just the vehicles, but also the boats. We've invested in very stable hulled boats, aluminium boats, very quiet, so you can hear those alarm calls that might lead you to a sighting. But otherwise, yeah, that's very shallow pitch, a very stable platform for folk with if they need tripods or monopods. In our game viewing vehicles, we have bean bags for guests to use, but from experience, the more sort of keen amateurs and professionals and group-led stuff, they often come with their own. But yes, our vehicles, particularly in the Kafui, where we do a lot more photographic-based safaris on the Busanga area. We've also got charging stations in the vehicles as well. So if folk go for sort of more longer drives, they can have their battery sort of spare battery charging up whilst the other one is being used. And yeah, small things like that for photographers, we definitely see goes a long way.
Yeah, awesome. And do you guys generally find that photography groups will tend to get their own private vehicle? Is that usually the case?
For us again specifically, no, we've got our standard rates are shared activities. But if you have serious photographers, then booking a private vehicle is available at each camp. And certainly if you've got sort of 2, 3, or 4 folk in a group, or one very keen photographer, then it's actually quite a cost-effective way to ensure that privacy. So yeah, it's definitely available, but sort of extra to the norm.
Yeah, similar situation at Imvelo Lodges. We, depending on the group size, let's say we had six photographers, we would take 2 vehicles. We would only charge them for 1 private vehicle. So that there'll be 3 photographers per vehicle that each have a row of seats, so it had free movement to go left and right from one side of the vehicle to the other, obviously depending on the sightings. But yes, we're trying to accommodate them as best as possible as that without making it too expensive.
Yeah, awesome. And
You want me to tell you from an Indian perspective very quickly as well? Our Jeeps are much smaller than our African ones. For photographers, generally people only try to see 2 people per Jeep. That way they can fit all the equipment. You could do 4, but it just gets cramped up with all the gear. We are dense forest, so our vehicles are actually much smaller and they need to turn around much quicker when the tigers are moving. So for navigation purposes, we never really had the Land Rovers or the bigger vehicles, in our national parks. So generally 2, we can, of course, we provide bean bags and all the standard stuff and modify Jeeps accordingly based on every photographer. So if there's a photo tour leader, they can come in advance or talk to us in advance, and we'll modify Jeeps by, putting bamboo sticks or something, whatever we need. But we can't really put tripods in our vehicles and make them stand. Some monopods still work, but no tripods there.
that's a good point with the monopod. Awesome. Cool. Shifting a little bit to guides. I got kind of 2 questions here. Generally speaking, how well versed are your guides when it comes to photography? Have they done any sort of photography training? How do they handle photography groups? I want you guys to talk a little bit about the guiding. Yep.
Mark, I think you have to be a teacher and call on the students.
Well, we specialize in photography tours, so we've had pro photographers from all over the world basically lead small groups, and our guides basically are the hosts. And through the years, and we're talking probably through the decades now, our guides have gotten some in the field technical skills. They're not pro photographers themselves, but they've certainly gotten into the passion of it. And ultimately, we actually have annual photography competition among the staff just to really inspire each other. Jason's art hangs up everywhere in the office as well. So you really are exposed as a employee to good photography. So while we wouldn't say that our guides are published photographers, they really understand the tics and requirements of photographers and can give guests some, basic foundational advice, especially when it comes to, F points, especially camera maintenance, dust again, and all those things. So most of our tours are always being led by a pro photographer who specializes in hosting the guests, and that knowledge has become invaluable. And that's how all of us learned on the job. Get out there and ask questions.
Yeah, awesome. And then kind of my second part of that question, and this kind of happens quite a lot with photography groups. Do you often get groups that are so specific on one type of animal or one bird, and how do you deal with that as a DMC or as an operator on the ground?
You mean like normally people came with a wish list that they want to
Yeah,
see or they want to get a photo? All the
exactly.
time.
Yeah.
As guys, we go through the list and we know it's going to happen today, tomorrow, something that is not happening in this life, but we never tell the people that. But we try to do as much as we can just to find everything that the people want to see.
Right.
The other thing is most of the guys know sometimes people show up with 3 different cameras and they have no idea how to use any of those cameras. Especially when we have a group, let's say we have 8 people, we have 6 people, they know how to take pictures, but we have 2 people that have no idea what they're doing with the cameras. And sometimes, this is funny, you ask them, why you have that camera? And she told me, oh, my guy in Brazil used this camera, he took all these amazing pictures. And what about the other camera? Oh, my guy in Alaska used this camera, has this amazing picture of bears. So that's the things that we have to deal with. So in my opinion, normally I tell people, well, okay, let's put one camera away and let's start working just with one camera.
Yeah, that's a good point, Alex. So just a couple more points here in our discussion that always comes up when we talk to photographers is, are there places in the areas that you operate in where you can easily get rent gear? And sometimes photographers, when you're out, you go on a trip, you forget a battery pack or an SD card, or maybe even want to rent out a lens. Is that something that's easily available in the destinations that that you guys operate in?
Absolutely, you can rent gear. We take them to town to get extra battery and cards. But in Namibia, we work capture Namibia, and you can rent a variety of lenses, camera, especially the zoom lenses. You need that in Namibia. I mean, the story of getting close to the rhino is an exception. Most of the time, they are so bloody shy, they hide behind milk boss. So a lot of people realize when they arrive in the country saying, I need a longer lens. So certainly possible.
It's a little bit harder for India, but there are more and more companies. But if we know them in advance, that at least a week in advance, that whatever lens we need, we can arrange them in India. But last minute is very hard because our jungles don't really have camera body rental shops, so they have to come from Delhi or Bangalore or one of the biggest cities. So it has to sort of be shipped in or carried in.
Yeah, similar situation in Zimbabwe. It's actually probably worse. Very few options. But I guess given enough warning, possibly arrange something if guests are coming through Johannesburg before they head up to the falls, possibly arrange something like that. But generally speaking, no, it's not really an option.
Okay, yeah. So Alex and I were talking about that, considering a lot of the places that we operate in are in jungles. So make sure you pack the extra SD cards and the battery packs. And then just sorry, go ahead, Alex.
Costa Rica, forget about renting equipment. That's why most of the guys here, we always carry, 1 or 2 extra batteries. But now there's so many different cameras and every model uses a different battery that is getting harder and harder for us. Compact flash card, we always have extras, but I always tell people they're not next day delivery in Costa Rica, so you might have to bring everything you need.
And then the last point here that I have, guys, is are there any lodges in the areas that you operate in that have, you know, editing facilities? I know in photography groups, it's quite common where they will want to edit photos after they've captured, you know, 10,000 shots in a day. They'll come in as a group and edit stuff. Do you guys offer that, or are there, you know, lodges in the places that you operate in where you can do that?
Yeah, I can just say from our camps, not all of our camps, but our camp on the Busanga Plains where the first image was taken, we recently put in a darkened photo editing room. We're getting a lot of professional photographers leading photographic groups specifically coming to the Kafui more and more and to the Busanga. And yeah, having an area that they can go and make dark, and the tour leaders offering their photographic sort of advice to their guests on how to edit and stuff like that. So yeah, we actually do have an area for photographers to edit, and of course, even just for FIT folk who've come with their own on their own steam, the room is still available, of course, and it's got extra power sockets and yeah, the ability to make it nice and dark to make sure that your settings are correct. Yes, we do have that.
Yeah, awesome. And I will just end off with something that I learned today from Alex, that generally when, you know, you get photography groups at the end of the day, they gather around and they do this thing called chimping. Alex, can you tell us what the hell chimping is?
I learned this for one of my guests here. So, you know, when you go and shooting session and you get all bunch of different pictures and people get in the car and they go, oh, oh, when they start checking their photos. That's what we call chimping here. Oh, oh, oh. I'm pretty sure you have seen or hear this after your photo shoot.
I've never heard of that before, but that's classic guiding joke, Alex. Thank you so much. And that's it, guys. That concludes our photography session. I know it's a bit of a breadth of topics and a variety of different photography styles, but hopefully you learned a little bit from this session, and that, you know, here at Kusini, we can definitely try to help your clients get into the best possible scenarios where you can take these amazing photographs. So please let us know if you have any questions, but otherwise, you know, really thank you for attending our webinar, and thank you guys, Kusini partners, for staying late and tuning in.
Thanks very much, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Well done.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.